Oh,
right.
we see it now. All right, thank you.
This is an addition to an old historical building in San Francisco. The old part you can see on the left, and then our new part is on the right. And these little pods come out and they turn towards the sun because the old building kind of ignored the sun. So our bit tries to correct the old building by being more environmental that way. Next. And this is a little addition we did to a tiny little house, and then you can see the existing building on the left there. And then our addition pops right up. This is made out of prefabricated panels, and when it rains, all the water is collected and then runs down the side and then is used in the yard. And lots of recycled materials, lots of salvage materials. And then the color comes from it was the client's favorite pair of shoes, or that color. So that's what she wanted the building to be. Next. And then here's another one. And if you notice, the thing turns in the back to try to turn towards the sunlight and try to connect much more to nature. Next.
Hi, Eric. Before we go to the next slide, I thought maybe, I don't know if you agree, this might be a good time to just see if the students have some questions, because I see a recurring theme in terms of the architecture and being used to maybe get more sun power or used to collect water for the gardens or for the bathrooms, things like that. So I wanted to know, based upon, Westmount, I know you're building something for students in Ecuador, if you have any questions for Eric before he moves on. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Lucas. I'm at Westmount Charter. I'd just like to know if you incorporate the environment, such as trees, into your designs, whether or not you use the surrounding area to your advantages, such as shade, wind power, things like that. Thank you.
Well, trees are a great design tool, and trees can be used in all sorts of different ways. They can be used as a giant windscreen and divert the wind to where you want it to go in the building. Trees can be used to create shading, especially deciduous trees. So in the summer they're full of leaves and then they shade the building, and then in the winter the leaves fall off and then the sunlight comes right through the branches, and then we can use it to heat up the building. And trees are also really glorified water pumps. Anywhere you put them into the soil, they help stabilize the soil, help humidify the air, and clean up the air. Trees are a good way if you have a lot of cars nearby. You can plant a row of trees and use that to help filter some of the exhaust from the cars. So absolutely, trees are a vital part. And then of course we can use trees for fun and build a building around the trees and have the tree growing up through the building. And there's lots of different ways to do that. Any other questions?
That was a great question. South Plantation, do you have a comment or question for Eric? Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Josiah. We just want to say that every time that Eric speaks, we kind of lose the picture, so we haven't seen all of your designs. But we want to know, how have your designs made your classroom sustainable? Thank you.
Made our classroom sustainable. I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but we'll get into that more hopefully in the...
Like the designs of your buildings and, like the designs of your buildings and stuff. How have they made it sustainable?
In everything that we put into the building, we ask a series of questions. So we ask, where does this thing come from? What are the byproducts of making all of that? What's going to happen to it when we're done with it? Is it a healthy material? We ask all these questions because we're trying to figure out the impact. Like, look at your I can see your classroom, right? You might not realize this, but inside your classroom, you have desks that are filled with formaldehyde, which is giving off a toxic chemical. You have floors made of vinyl that are glued down with more toxic glues, vinyl base around the floors. You have paints that have a lot of chemicals in them. You're just surrounded in a big soup of chemicals, and the windows probably don't open that well. It's a typical classroom, and the trouble is that we build our typical buildings to be pretty poisonous. So what we're trying to do is remove all those toxins, remove all those poisons, and then use materials that are much more sustainable that we can collect. So that way, when your kids are your age, we'll have resources left to build with.
Thank you to both locations for the questions. And Eric, I find that very interesting in terms of the process that you go with in terms of answering and asking core questions first before you start to build. And I think that's pretty relevant based upon like the environment that you're actually going to build in and what's around it. So I'll go to your next slide.
Well, we don't have to go through all these. This is an office, and if you look on the wall, we have seashells along the curved part of the wall. All the fabrics are made of organic fabrics without any dyes in them, and the carpet is reclaimed from old soda bottles, and then we have recycled plastics on the walls, and it doesn't need to look ugly. You know, it can look pretty and attractive. Next slide. And then this is a house. We thought, well, why can't we put in, instead of just punching holes to create windows, why can't we make the whole building just a big glass box? So the whole building is really just these little beams that hold it up, and then between are these panes of glass. And when birds fly over the building, you can see their shadows along the living room floor, and the whole thing is turned towards the sun, so it never gets too hot. And in the winter, it stays nice and warm. Next. And then this house is made out of mud. They're just bricks of mud that we stacked up and built the walls and then covered that with a plaster. And then in the front, we don't have a lawn because lawns shouldn't really grow here. It's a desert. So instead, we plant native plants that don't need watering, and they just grow based on the watering system that's already there, which we call rain. And the rain is enough to keep the plants alive, which is the way it should be. Next. And then here we have a fireplace made out of stones that we found just right there on the property. And then the old beams are old reclaimed beams that used to be, an old factory that we cleaned up and then made into the roof. Next. And then here, this is a pretty simple structure, but it looks complicated. It's just little sticks of wood, but each stick is angled a little differently. And then between it is a recycled plastic, and it lets in the light but doesn't let in all the heat, so you can keep the building nice and cool and create kind of that weird dramatic thing. And it's a fun way to play with building that's not very expensive. Next. Okay, so buildings have the biggest impact on the planet above anything else, more so than even cars. And a lot of people look at the car and blame the car for the impact on global warming and pollution in the environment, but you can see the buildings are responsible for nearly half of all global warming emissions. Cars are only 30%, and of that, only 10% are passenger cars, the cars that you and I drive in. The rest are trucks and big diesel things. So buildings, more so than anything else, have an impact on the planet. And hopefully, as you're studying this, you're learning that the design decisions that you make can have a profound effect on the environment. Next. All told, 72% of all the world's energy goes into buildings. It takes a lot of effort to keep the lights on and to keep them running and keep them hot and keep them cool when we need them. And the buildings do it all together too well, because your school is used during the day, and at night nobody's in it, or hopefully nobody's in it. But yet it's still consuming energy all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Next. And then to build all these buildings, 40% of all the world's materials just go into building and maintaining these buildings. So buildings really have a huge impact on the planet. Next. So it's easy to look at the car and point to the car and look at this mound of tires and think, well, the car is bad for the planet. But next. But really, it's our buildings that have the big impact, because somewhere along the way we decided that we had to trade landscape for hardscape, that we couldn't have nature and building in the same spot, that we had to give up one to have the other, and we paved over the entire world to do it. And what's left is, this weird thing where we have the built environment and we have nature outside of it, and we have to leave buildings to go see nature.